Welcome back to the Wednesday Rewind. Limitless, episode 14, Fundamentals of Naked Portraiture. We begin with an interview. Mike and Ike are trying to recruit help. Two bodyguards just aren't enough for Brian Finch. Brian calls the new guy Spike. Although it turns out the first guy he calls Spike to go along with Mike and Ike gets rejected. And the second candidate also gets rejected. The third guy seems like he might be the charm. Brian and the third candidate, who, as I said, is being called Spike, are bonding over bands because Brian has posters in his headquarters and, they're getting together, being cool about stuff. On Spike's first day on the job, he delivers the NZT to Brian, and Brian is disappointed because Spike isn't playing the fun games like Mike and Ike do where they, basketball it to him or just play games where he can get the delivery of the pill. Brian is complaining to Rebecca that the FBI is having him count sheep outside of Islamabad. He said, "This is literally how people fall asleep." Speaking of sleep, my sleep schedule is all off. From both promoting Everlasting Survivors Volume 1 all day long, relaunch on Indiegogo, and, let's be honest, my fear of failure. But if you'd like to help with the relaunched campaign and ease my fears, click the link in the description, go to the Indiegogo, pick yourself up a copy of Everlasting Survivors Volume 1 all day long. There are 5 cover options. There are 2 posters. There's a hat, a shirt, all kinds of things. Great stuff. Good story. You'll enjoy it. Thank you. Back to the show. While Brian is complaining about the mission that the FBI have him on, looking into Islamabad, Rebecca is looking into Senator Mara's coat. Brian is talking to Brian, just like I love, and in Brian's head, Brian is worried, but Naz interrupts Brian talking to himself and says that she has him a new mission. Brian is now working on a murder of a Kraft worker, Kraft being the company that made the robotic arm from the episode Armageddon. The lady that was murdered made the jetpack that Brian got to play with at the end of the episode Armageddon. Her name is Eloise, but it gets crazier. It's not just that she made the jetpack. She also has a project where she copies the brains, what she calls mind files, of geniuses, because her project is to try and advance artificial intelligence. Brian and Rebecca get to talk to the murder victim, Eloise, because she copied her own mind as a part of this project. This show is just so clever with things like this. The mind file of Eloise Carmichael is unable to understand that it isn't Eloise herself. It thinks it and the victim are one and the same. I'm not sure if that's a glitch of the mind file or if it's an accident or if this is something to be suspicious of, because the show likes laying a little breadcrumbs throughout the show. Brian is so cocky that he can find out who messed with the Kraft system to get to Eloise, because they're bragging about how they have all the best biometrics and they scan for hackers and all this stuff. But he says that he can't do it until tomorrow because he knows, not that Kraft knows, that his NCT is wearing out for the day. But on this night, Brian meets with Mr. Sands to talk about the coat caper, where he switched out the coat that Senator Mara had worn when he got shot and switched it with one without NZT blood on it. And Sands is treating this more of a debriefing, and Brian thought it was just a pop in, hey, here it is, here's the info. But Sands wants more info, and when Brian tells him that only one person saw him, Sands gives him his side effect blocker, but very aggressively, and Brian is taken aback. But, in the end, Brian got what he needed and thinks that he has Senator Mara and Sands on his side. Spike, the new bodyguard, is sucking up to Brian super hard. While he's giving him the NZT, he's offering him shots of like wheatgrass and other health stuff to, be polite. And after Brian is, basically giving Mike and Ike the look like, hey, why aren't you more like this guy? It's kind of funny. But after Brian takes his NZT, he begins hacking. And if you remember from the prior episode, he said that hacking is super boring. So he starts having us watch, as the audience, vines, short videos of a dog saying, I love you. After figuring out the spy code, Brian imagines Harrison Boyle taking down the hacker. And as he puts it, it is always more exciting in his imagination. The only thing is that the hacker isn't the killer. Also, they find out when they interrogate the hacker that Eloise isn't as clean as they had thought. She was trying to sell the mind files. Scratch that. She wasn't trying. She sold the mind files. At this point, I notated that I'm glad the show is back on track. No more dinosaur BS. And we're just back to the good old fun Brian NZT stuff. Quentin, the guy who contacted the FBI, keeps hitting up Brian, but why wouldn't he? His mind file was one of the ones that was taken. To try and figure out where to go next, Brian goes to that sad IT guy, James, for help and to figure out where one would sell, mind file. And James tells Brian that the brains were sold on the dark web. After realizing that the fence who orchestrated the selling of these mind files is also into stolen art, Brian sends Spike, the new bodyguard, out to get art supplies so that he can get another crime under his belt, art forgery. Brian tries his hand at doing some of the art, but realizes that all of his forgeries lack the soul or the heart of the things he's trying to do, because the actual artist would draw live nudes, and so Spike volunteers to be Brian's model. Mike is getting... So Mike walks in, he's disgusted by this. He goes to talk to Ike, and at this point it's revealed to Ike that Mike is getting a promotion, and that Spike was brought in to replace Mike and work with Ike, not to help them both. Brian gets a bite from the fence on his make-believe fake... or he gets the fence interested in his pretend stolen art, which is actually just him faking the art. And when they meet, the fence can't quit coughing. And he says that he's a bit under the weather, although Brian believes he was poisoned. The fence is now dead, but now that they know who the fence is, that has led to them finding the mind files. When Brian and Rebecca go to where that the mind files were purchased, or to the place they were purchased by, they are not welcome there. The place that they're trying to be turned away from is a think tank. They are working on plans to, sabotage Venezuela or overthrow something, because Brian overhears, reads lips, figures out stuff. And because Brian has figured things out just from the few moments he's been there, he gets him and Rebecca to get to see the top guy, the big boss of this think tank. And that character is played by Tate Donovan, a guy that I know from the OC and a bunch of other things, but he's that big boss of the think tank, and he admits it immediately. He's like, yeah, I bought the mind files. He says that he did it to protect them from falling into other countries' hands. It's an interesting twist to think that the think tank bought them, but in their minds for the good. While Brian and Rebecca are away, Mike and Ike are talking, and Ike tells Mike that he has been spying on Spike, and shows Mike that Spike has been snooping on Brian's computer. The funny part is Ike is so, gullible, if you will, that he believes Spike is spying on Brian just to be a better kiss-ass. But to me, knowing this show, I'm pretty sure the odds are strong in the favor of there being some other motivation. Upon being at the think tank, Brian and Rebecca realize that they didn't buy all 6 of the stolen mind files, only 5 of them, and the one that wasn't bought by the think tank was Eloise herself. And so back at the FBI, Brian has upgraded the file they have of Eloise's information, and he calls it LO 2.0. And Brian is trying to help Rebecca get information from this new version. At that point, Boyle walks in and says they can go meet up with the evidence check guy that Brian had talked to change out the coats. I mean, obviously they don't know Brian's the one who switched out the coats, but at this point, Brian knows that he's about to get caught because Harris and Boyle are awfully close to figuring it all out. Brian knows he can't not go because then they'll figure it out. But if he does go, then the guy will point him out. So Brian decides to go with him. But while in the car, he's going through all the stuff that they had learned and thinks that he found the killer. Gerard, the guy that Brian thinks killed Eloise, is in interrogation, and when he breaks, but not because of threats, but because Brian realizes that Gerard was infatuated with Eloise and says that if I can give you 5 more minutes with my upgraded Eloise, will you confess that you killed her and the fence? And he does, just to talk to this new programmed version of her memories. While Gerard is talking to the not real Eloise, Harris asks out Quentin from Kraft if he would like to go out for a drink, which I thought was pretty crazy, given the fact that it often feels like Harris is into Brian. And maybe it's just because she thinks she can't make that move with him being the subject and all. After this, we see that Mike and Ike are talking to Naz about the fact that Spike was spying on Brian, and it's revealed that Spike is actually a mole from ADIC Johnson from DC. And it's funny because when Spike comes to Brian's headquarters to get his stuff, it's revealed that Brian knew all along that A. Dick Johnson was the guy who sent Spike because, Brian, being on NZT, realized, hey, who's going to know how to get on my good side? And he figured out all these things because he was, being a kiss-up. And so before Brian leaves for the day, he asks where Rebecca is to Boyle, and Boyle tells him that she was going to stop by the evidence locker to meet with the evidence control clerk before she goes out with Quentin. And Brian's just convinced at this point that he's done, he's caught, and so he's back at his house worrying when Rebecca comes over to talk, and she tells him that the evidence control clerk is dead. And I don't know if it was Mara or Sands, but it's not a coincidence that a guy with a peanut allergy happens to eat peanuts and die before she can go talk to him. To me, this was a great 5 out of 5 episode. It's back on track. The show did really great, much better than last week when they were scared to, go all the way. And speaking of going all the way, you should go all the way to this channel on Friday to listen to my triple shot for WrestleMania, where I will talk about what I think will happen, what I want to happen, and a wild card pick. Also, come back this Monday for Monday Movie Mayhem, where me and Josiah will break down 12 Rounds 2 Reloaded. And then join me here next Wednesday as I continue to review Limitless, the show. Thank you.